your talk.
Yeah, so I'm Rohit Crasta, but I think most of you know me as Ro. I was living in Boston. I actually don't live in Boston anymore. I was there from 2014 about 2018, and you might know me from Playcrafting, which was once Games Forum. You might know me from Demiurge or Funkitron, things like that. And I had a brief little contract stint at Fablevision as well. So those are some places you might know me. I was also like a frequent event person at the time, but I've seen a lot of new faces since then, which is awesome. But Boston has a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, the talk I'm giving is about a game I'm making called 9. It's an indie game, and why don't I share my screen? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start then. So today I'm talking about 9 lessons for making 9. It is an indie game that is currently in development. Like I mentioned, I've worked at some Boston studios, but I've been making games for about 10 years. Here are some of the games I've worked on, primarily in the casual and mobile spaces, although I do have some indie experience. I worked on a game called Brain and Brawn about 7 years ago or something like that. And DJ Scratch is a more recent thing that I worked on in my new company, GameCo. We make video games for the casino industry. So we're kind of trying to innovate by adding, skill-based gameplay and more interactive elements, which is a fun, innovative space to be in, that's for sure. So I don't know if you recognize any of these games, but this is stuff I've worked on. Today we're going to cover 2 parts. Part 1 is an overview of 9. I just want to give some context, especially for those who don't know the game. And part 2 is I'm going to talk through the 9 lessons. This is the meat of the talk. This is what we're here for. Some disclaimers. 9 is still in development, so this is not really a postmortem. I know that Boston Postmortem doesn't only do postmortem, so I wanted to throw this out there. We're kind of more in an alpha-E entering beta state, to be honest, where the polish is very asymmetrical. So just keep in mind that the lessons I talk about are things that I think I've learned, and they might change by the end of development, so we'll see. I'm fairly critical of the game. Many of the lessons relate to my mistakes I made along the way. That's because I'm not here to promote the game, although I'd love it if you all came and bought it one day. I'm here to talk about game design and game dev, and I feel like a lot of the learning comes from the mistakes, naturally. And finally, the mileage may vary. The things that worked or didn't work for me may be different for you and your game and your context. So let's dive right in. It's an overview of 9. Here's a pitch that we're still working on. 9 Lives to Save the Moon is kind of the short tagline version. But 9 is a roguelike platformer about a cat who has 9 lives. 9 lives? Sorry, let's try that again. 9 is a roguelike platformer about a cat who has 9 lives to stop evil mice from stealing the moon. I'm going to do a little gameplay demo. Actually, I'll do the video. And just to know, there's no sound, and that is known. Hopefully you should see the cat jumping around. Hopefully it's not too choppy.
Nope, looks great.
Cool. You'll notice that there's a lot of use of a pounce attack. That's one of the signature moves in the game. You can slide down walls, hang on walls. Big focus on movement and agility. You can pick up cheese because, of course, mice have cheese hidden in their spaceship. Yeah, so that's a kind of a little overview of the things that are in 9 already. You got to see a little bit of the gameplay, a little bit of the movement, a hint at a boss. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to work on so far. Some key features of the game is, of course, the cat-like agility. You are a cat, and it is a platformer, so hopefully you should be agile. You can jump, you can wall slide, you can pounce. The pounce is like a 45-degree angle dive, sort of homing attacky, but you don't home. It's just always 45 degrees, and you bounce off things when you hit them. You can swipe in different directions, and I'm playing around with some more advanced jumps that are a little bit Mario 64-like. We have a charming world. where, it's the cat versus the mice. The mice have built this spaceship. They're piloting mechs. They're trying to steal the moon. The moon is made of cheese. There's a lot going on, and we're trying to bring out that charm in the art. We have intense boss fights. Because each boss mouse is piloting a big mech, we get to have, explosions and missiles and all that kind of fun stuff that you associate with mechs. And finally, there's the replayability side of it. It is a roguelike. The levels are procedurally generated. So as we build up the content, there's going to be more and more replayability and variation between runs. So that's kind of an overview of 9. Hopefully you have some context there. I'm happy to talk more about the game itself after the talk. So let's get into our 9 lessons. Give you a little preview of what we're going to talk about. First, know your personal goals. Pick the right prototype. Make it personal. Lean into what resonates. Avoid unnecessary risks. Don't fight player expectations. Balance to feel-based parameters. Alpha is a myth. And trust in a good process. So I know that's a lot to throw at you at once, but I wanted to give you sort of a preview of what's to come. We're going to go through each one of these one by one. Let's get started. Lesson number 1. Know your personal goals. So like I mentioned up front, I've been making games for about 10 years. I don't need to make more games for the sake of making more games, right? I'm at a point in my career where shipped games is not in and of itself an achievement for me anymore. And that's not me trying to brag or anything. It's me trying to say I'm really actually focused more on quality now. If I ship 50 games in the next 5 years, or if I ship 1 game, it doesn't really make a difference to me. What matters to me is what interesting, high-quality, standout things can I do in those 5 years. That's what really matters. That's going to be my measure of success. I also don't need this game to make money. It'd be great if it did, but the point being that I have a day job right now that pays my bills. This is a passion project for me. So if the game totally flops financially, it's not going to, cause me any personal distress, right? So what are my personal goals? Well, I need this game to be a few things. 1, I want it to be up to my standards of polish and funness. Like I said, I don't want to release it for the sake of releasing it. That's not enough for me. I want it to be something that represents my standards, something that I could show and be proud of. I want it to be something I can't make at work, so it should probably be quirky and different. And, because it's something I can make at work, then why not do it at work where I'm getting paid to do it, right? And finally, I want it to be worth it of the Magic Incubator. So to give a little context to that, this is a game that I actually pitched to Magic, which is a Media Arts Games Interactive Center. It is part of RIT, which is Rochester Institute of Technology. I pitched it to them. They have this Community Incubator, and they were giving out funding to a few games. I won that funding in spring of last year. So the funding was something I was able to use to hire a team. It's been really great. When I say worthy of their support, there's no strings attached. They're not taking any rev share, and there was no specific requirements for how I had to release it. It's actually been really fantastic how awesome they've been to work with. But I still want to make them proud, right? They're putting their name in it indirectly by, investing in me, right? They've invested in me and the team, and they want this game to be good, and I want them to be proud that they chose us, right? Why do personal goals matter? Your personal goals are going to guide your approach to development. So we talk about design, like core pillars in design a lot, and those are great on a team level, but on a personal level, especially in indie game development, these are even higher level than that, right? This can guide your approach to multiple projects, to how you take on projects and what projects you choose to do. So to give you some examples, I'm not paying myself because I mentioned I had the day job, and that has given me more money for hiring teammates. And that's been really, really effective. It's let me do more. I have more resources for hiring good people. Actually, some of who are on this call. I think Brian's here. He's our composer. So yeah, that's been really, really awesome because I've had more resources for building a good team. And then another one is that I chose to delay in September. This was a hard decision. Originally, the plan was to make this game really quick. I wanted to get out in fall. Of course, the scope was way out of whack because it always is. And in September, I decided, okay, let's delay things. I want to take the time that is necessary to finish this game and do it right. I also asked my teammates at the time, hey, can you guys pause? They had another game they wanted to work on anyway. It actually kind of worked out. I needed calendar time to iterate on the design because there were major design problems in the game. And I didn't want them kind of waiting around for me, and I didn't want to be giving them busy work. None of that is a good use of anyone's time, especially in indie when everyone is kind of working part-time, right? So I just asked them to pause, and I used the fall to deeply iterate on the gameplay, redo a lot of enemies, that kind of stuff. And I'm happy to say that the team has now gotten back together as of this month, and we're going to now dive into polishing the game and getting out the door. Lesson number 2, pick the right prototype. So to do this, first of all, you want to make lots of things naturally. Make lots of prototypes, digital, paper prototypes, whatever your jam is. Actually do lots of game jams. It's a great way to make lots of prototypes because the more you make, the more you have to choose from. That's pretty straightforward. But you don't want to just make lots of things and then hope you find something. I mean, that's great if you do. Hopefully you find something that is so exciting and sparkful that it's just the obvious next thing. But I often find that you are in a situation where there's lots of trade-offs between different prototypes you've made. It's not clear which one to choose. This diagram is from Dan Cook from Lost Garden. It describes what he calls the stage gate model. It applies more to, I think, studios and actually a very large studio like Supercell, which is known for Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, etc. They use something that looks a little bit like this model, where they have cells or small teams that work on prototypes that then go on to soft launches, and they're evaluated at different stages. Hopefully you can see my mouse. They're evaluated at different stages, and then they're kind of greenlit to keep going. And it almost becomes a little bit like a tournament where projects are knocked out, and then the resources for those projects are reallocated to different projects. So over time, if you're getting through the stages, if a prototype is getting through the stages, it is getting more and more resources. And then hopefully that leads you to success. That actually works really well in kind of the mobile free-to-play land, where you want to really minimize your investment up front because, you want to kind of narrow down and solidify your KPIs and et cetera. That's mobile stuff. But getting back to indie development, you can apply this at a smaller scale as well. I know that sounds weird, but if you think of these as tiny little rapid prototypes, maybe one or two of them you've turned into a vertical slice, but that's more work. You could do this asynchronously as well. You could be making little prototypes while you're working on another big project. I highly recommend something like the 1 Hour Game Jam that happens every week. I think it's onehourgamejam.com. 1 hour seems crazy, but it's a great way to just jot something. It's almost like jotting down a note when you're at that tiny scale of a game jam. And then you have these little ideas or seeds of a possible game. And then when it's time to choose your next project, you lay out all your prototypes, which are probably in various states of completion, and you evaluate them using some kind of stage gate model. You can maybe make a few more if there's some that are at the tip of your tongue, but you want to kind of narrow it down so that you can choose the best ones, right? It might be that you have a prototype that you jammed it out on a 1 hour game jam. Now you're going to spend a little bit more time, but you give yourself a short deadline to move to the next stage, and then ask yourself, can I meaningfully take this to the next level with a small iteration? Or is it like I need to dive months and months into this to make this the next iteration? That's the difference you want to look for. But even then, that's not enough to know how to pick a game, right? So to pick a prototype, you want to find the overlap between kind of positive things. So here's a diagram that I've seen: games you want to make, games you can make, games in the market. That's probably a good choice for an indie product, right? Here's a more generalized one for just kind of like meaningful work: what you love, what pays you well, what comes easily. You find the sweet spot to do something meaningful. We've all seen diagrams like this, and there's like 1,000 that I found on Google that are like different variations of the same basic concept, and they're fine. But I actually recommend you take your personal goals, like we talked about in lesson number 1, and you make your own personal Venn diagram. You want to find the overlap between those personal goals, the prototype that's going to hit all those personal goals for you. And that might be the perfect game to do your next project. To note, I have very strong opinions on prototyping and rapid prototyping, so I just want to throw out, I do have another workshop that I've given on this. I recommend checking that out. I'll post a link later, but I just don't want to dive down the rabbit hole of prototyping right now because it's a massive topic. Lesson number 3, make it personal. So here's two examples of indie games many of you know that are very personal stories. Celeste, is somewhat of an allegory for the trans experience. Hyper Light Drifter, the designer has a heart condition and worked elements of that into the main character, the Drifter. I don't have that kind of deeply personal story that I could tell in an indie game, and you can't force this kind of thing, right? If you force it, it's just going to come off rigid and weird and fake, right? But I do feel like that's the kind of thing that leads to the most interesting kinds of games. I could talk about being Indian, about being a minority, but they're not defining parts of my identity. So I don't want to force it. Now, they were for my dad, and that's why he wrote a bunch of books about being Indian, but they're not for me. I do still have feelings and cares, though. Like, I do have things that I'm passionate about. I do have, things that, kind of like not just preferences, but kind of like personal beliefs that drive what I do. One of them is that I'm rather nonviolent. Now, I'm not against, or I'm not like critical of media that has violence in it. And in fact, there's many things I love that are violent, honestly. But I try to avoid it in my work of any kind because for me, it feels extra to me. And I never personally see the need for it in the kind of work I want to do. So that's a personal belief that helps drive my work. To illustrate an example, I do love action. And you can see in these two examples, this is from Samurai Champloo. This is an awesome GIF of Mugen jumping around, swiping his sword, doing his thing. It's really, really cool. It's high action, but no one's getting hurt. That's the key. There's no harm. There's no violence in this scene. Whereas in Kill Bill, the bride, already is covered in blood and is about to kill a bunch of people violently. So, I mean, you can see these are two examples, both that have action, but one of them is significantly more violent, right? So I wanted to focus on action specifically for 9 because I thought that was the right thing. It was a way for me to have action without violence. This actually is not as easy as you might think with a cat versus mouse theme. Cats are natural predators. They do hunt and eat mice. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's nature. But I didn't want to depict mice getting violently hunted. So, this is something that I was trying to figure out how to accomplish. My method ended up being the kind of robot approach. Here you see Samurai Jack chopping a robot in half so that you don't have to worry about any blood. Sonic is hitting this little robot and it poofs in smoke and a little critter comes out. In both of these examples, the robot is getting destroyed, but no living thing is getting harmed. So again, you have the action without violence. And this is the solution that we're taking with 9 as well. You can see here, we have this little mouse piloting this tank. We have this mech that was made in the image of a cat, very much like Mechasonic. We have this little pokey stab lab boss. And they're all robots. So when you destroy the robots, the mouse is going to pop out and kind of, it's there piloting the mechs. You're destroying the mechs. Part of this is also in the story as well. The mice are evil. They're trying to steal the moon. It's very straightforward. You want to save the moon. You want to stop their evil plan. Your goal isn't to hunt and kill them. Your goal is to stop their evil plan. So all you have to do is get on their spaceship, destroy their mechs, and stop their drilling operation. And if you can do that, you've saved the world and you've harmed no one. Another way I want to make it personal is, of course, I have cats, and many of you probably have cats, and cats are awesome. I did not grow up with cats, but in my adult life, I've gotten to know these 3 wonderful cats, and I've gotten to know how different cats can be. They all have their own unique little personalities, as well as there seems to be like this sort of shared experience of owning a cat, because cats also have very cat-like qualities and things that we all associate with cats, like playing and pouncing and all kinds of things. One of the ways it's manifested is that we created a cat channel in our Discord, and it's just a place for you or whoever to share photos of your cat, because you should. And like, everyone thinks that their cat is the cutest cat in the world, and you're all right. And I know personally I felt in the past, wow, I love my pets so much. I want to share them all the time. And sometimes I feel like I'm annoying people by doing that. So I want to create a space where you didn't have to feel that way. I am actively encouraging you to share your cat photos. In fact, you're probably not sharing enough cat photos in this world. We all need to see your cute cats. So I'll get off that topic now. On the right here, this is just one tiny example, but as we move into polish, we're going to try and bring out more cat-like elements in the game. Something that's really fun about cats is that, like all animals, their play mimics, their real-life behavior. It's a way for them to practice important evolutionary skills in a safe context. That's what many believe play is, practicing skills in a safe context. So if you ever watch a cat play, it looks a lot like they're hunting, right? And I think that's super awesome and super cute. So maybe this cat can kind of be wiggling its butt a little bit, maybe the way it pounces can be very playful. There's a very mixed nature of play and hunt, and I want to bring that into the action of the game as much as we can. I think those kinds of personal elements, because they're personal to me, because I love cats, because I care about nonviolence, they're going to really bring the game to life and make it more interesting. Lesson number 4, lean into what resonates. So here are 2 examples of awesome indie games that are very much defined by their mechanics. Super Hot, of course, it has the time moves when you move. Braid has the time manipulation mechanics. 9 doesn't really have that. So I did have mechanic ideas. The game did start with a sort of 9 lives, 9 bosses, 9 minutes sort of triple threat kind of idea, but that was more like a designer curiosity. That's not the kind of mechanic or mechanics that are a hook that sells the game, right? It's just like a thing that interested me, that I followed. I can't sell the game on that concept, really. These games can, right? Because those mechanics are so innovative, and like you can summarize them in such a concise way. So what did resonate? Well, one of the things was this cat versus evil mouse trying to steal the moon that's made of cheese. That instantly was a hit with people. Even when this game was just yellow blocks jumping around, people liked the idea of the moon being cheesed. They liked evil mice. They liked being a cat. The theme resonated, which is funny because I don't consider myself a theme-driven kind of designer. I'm usually more bottom-up. I'm usually more mechanics-focused. Like my earliest indie game was Brain and Brawn, which was a simple little mechanics-driven puzzle. But I can't ignore what's working, right? People kept responding to this concept. When I pitched this story, or this kind of theme story concept, people lit up. And I feel like the right thing to do was to lean into it, to bring it out. One of the ways that it's not working right now, because we haven't polished the game yet, is that you can't really tell right now from that trailer you just saw, and if you played the game, it's not clear that the mice are even there. You're just fighting a bunch of robots, and there's no mice popping out. There's no mice working together. You might as well be a cat fighting robots. But to bring out that theme is to bring out the mice, to bring out the fact that they're working together to run this spaceship. They're working together to pilot these enemies, these mechs, and I think that's going to really bring the whole story to life and the whole world to life. Another thing that's resonated with people is Denny's art. I don't know if Denny's here. He's our artist. But Denny is an awesome low-res pixel artist. He did this cool animation on the left, and the cat is already one of the most standout things in the game because it has the most animations. This is really working for people. People like the low-res pixel art style. People like how the cat is both cute and cool, has a sort of Sonic feel to it. It's been a lot of fun, and it's working. So I want to bring out as much as Denny's animations as we can as we move into polish. Another thing that's been working, again from Denny has these fun little enemy designs. So I was just talking about the mice not being clear. I wanted a homing rocket, and Denny made a homing rocket with a mouse on top with a cowboy hat. He just added that because he's awesome. And I love the idea, but I was actually a little bit resistant because I was worried about the readability of the game, a fast-paced action platformer with a fast-moving camera. I was worried about the player recognizing what was a threat, what was not a threat, what was a hurt box, etc. Those things really don't matter. So at least in the first take of everything, all these mice are gone. You can see down here we have this cute concept of a laser turret, and the mice are all working together to hold it up, and this mouse here is pressing the button, it's shooting the laser turret. All we have right now is just the turret. And it does feel kind of flat, to be honest. So I'd like to try and find a way, and it is going to be a challenge, But I like to try and find a way as we move into polish to bring out these mice elements, to make it clear that they're working together, because I think that is so charming. And whenever someone sees something like this, it makes the game stand out. Everyone has seen robots before. Everyone has seen like Sonic fighting robots, or every other game that has robots and mechs and Gundams and whatever in it. But the mice controlling them, the mice piloting them, that is a lot more fun. I think the only game I could even think of that comes close is like Gato Roboto or something like that. And it's a different aesthetic, so I'm not worried about it. Lesson number 5. Avoid unnecessary risks. So 9 didn't actually start out as a platformer. It started with that 9 Lives Curiosity thing. That got me the cat, because of course. And I figured cats are agile, so that got me to platformer. So it was very much driven in this direction, and I decided to make it a platformer as a result of what I wanted to do first, which was the whole 9 thing. And that's fine. I mean, that definitely is a way to make an agile cat, is to make a platformer. But it turns out people have very strong opinions about how a platformer is supposed to feel. We've been playing platformers for 35 plus years, right? And it's not just strong opinions. I would even go further and say it's like muscle memory, right? People have innate muscle memory for how a platformer is supposed to feel to them. And there's a lot of tricks that people put in there, and there's a lot of kind of rules that have been established, both conscious and unconscious. So I've taken on an unnecessary risk because I didn't set out to make a platformer. I didn't have a specific innovation that I wanted to do in the platformer. I wasn't trying to like innovate in the platformer space. I ended up there. That's problematic because making platformers feel good is really, really hard. You can go play my prototype right now and you'll see what's good and what's not good very quickly, right? And the things that we need to work on. And it's just because it's hard and we need more iteration time to really nail that game feel. It's something that you're going to be iterating on until the end. And that's not really what I set out to do. So while it's been a wonderful learning experience to learn about how hard it is to make a platformer, it was definitely an unnecessary risk because it's really hard, and it's something that it's not necessarily my favorite part of game design, although it is fun. Another thing to note is that, you know, it's a solvable problem. I know that with enough time, I could make a platformer feel excellent with enough time and resources. But does that mean it was worth the trouble? Not necessarily, right? If my intention, as it originally was to make a game in 6 months, I've made games in short time frames before, mostly at work, but you know, still. And I could have probably made a game in 6 months, but by choosing this platformer concept, I made it way, way, way harder than and even harder than I expected. I knew it was going to be hard. It was even harder than that. I don't know if it was worth the trouble to choose the platformer concept. So that's what I mean by an unnecessary risk. If I were to do it all over again, I'd probably choose something like Corgi Engine or Rex Engine to layer on top of Unity and kind of just have some of those common problems solved for me because, you know, figuring out how to do coyote time and jump buffering and those kinds of tricks that everyone just expects out of the platformer, it would have been nice to just have that. It was, again, wasn't the part I was passionate about, was remaking all those things. Now, if you are passionate about those things, please go make a platformer. I want to see what you're going to do and what you're going to innovate with it and how you're going to refine those mechanics. But for me, it was a lot of work to recreate all those things, and it's still a lot of work to polish it. Here are some examples, just generalized, of like good and bad risks as an indie. So good risks, a brand new mechanic, like something that's totally new, like the super hot time moves as you move, right? Serving an unproven or niche or underserved audience, that's a great idea. A highly personal story, like we talked about with Celeste. Those are all great kinds of risks to take as an indie. They're the kinds of things that you are more likely, that you actually have an advantage of, because bigger AAA companies especially can't do this as easily, right, as you can as an individual. Here are some bad risks to take as an indie. One is a genre with high standards for polish and production value, like an RTS, like a platformer, like we talked about. Another one, play that needs tight balance to be fun. So that might be something like a 4X or an RTS, but it could apply to many different genres. The basic concept being, if the your game idea requires lots of systems to interlock, and the fun only happens when they interlock, and it needs to be balanced for it to be fun, that's really, really risky, because you are likely going to have to build those systems and then stitch them together and then balance it, and then hopefully at that point it's fun and you've already spent a lot of time working on your game. I think the better approach for an indie game is to find something that is fun really early, right? Something that's fun with a very simple core, whether it's a core mechanic or a cool story idea or something else that's just simple and fun, simple and clean, Kingdom Hearts style. So at the bottom here, something you don't know if you can do. This is like, for me, it'd be a roguelike. It'd be for like a platformer. It'd be like the platformer tricks. But, it's tough to say this because obviously you want to challenge yourself. That's a good thing. But you don't want to just take on total unknowns either. So I guess a better way to think of it is that these are bad risks up front. Your goal in prototyping is to turn the bad risks into good risks by solving them early. So an example would be, if the whole gameplay needs type balance, you want to make a rapid prototype that already shows that fun, that already shows the systems interlocking and working together. If you can't do it in a rapid prototype, maybe don't dive into a 1 to 4 year project because that's super duper risky. Same thing with something you don't know if you can't do. If you can prove it in the prototype, you've turned a bad risk into a good risk. You're awesome. In summary, it's hard enough to make a good indie game. Don't make it even harder by taking on an unnecessary risk. So we're about halfway through. I think at this point, I'll just take a quick break and say, does anyone have any questions for anything I've said so far?
We can also take questions in chat if you feel more comfortable typing your question out.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yep, so feel free to use the general channel, the general chat channel.
Play simple and clean.
If I was really bold, I'd sing it, but no.
Manny said, good stuff, which is an encouraging comment.
Cool. Well, I'll keep going, and if you think of anything, obviously there'll be time at the end of the talk. So, yeah. Lesson number 6. Don't fight player expectations. So, as I mentioned, I didn't really describe it in detail, but I started with this sort of 9 lives concept, 999, 9 lives, 9 minutes, 9 bosses. And I was just curious about, I like this weirdness of cats having 9 lives. And there were specific things I wanted to do with lives. That was one of the things I wanted to play with on a mechanical level. One of them was I wanted the player to be able to sacrifice a life at any time, one of your 9 lives, for a super blast. The super blast would deal lots of damage to a boss, perhaps. It would, you could use it to clear a room, something like that. It was a very powerful attack that you could do at any time at the cost of a life. So it was kind of like lives as resource management. That was interesting. Rubber banding system. I want the player to get stronger with each subsequent life, right? So like as you're getting down to your last few lives, you are stronger and it becomes more thrilling, and you get these kind of fun moments where you're almost dead, but you're also at your strongest. 9 lives in a single run. So this is sort of like when the game became a roguelike, because it actually didn't start that way, this was something that was rather unintuitive. Like, a roguelike, typically you associate a given run with a life. They're synonymous. And within the run, you're, losing and gaining health, but you're not typically losing lives. So this was something that was rather unintuitive off the bat, but I wanted to play with this idea of like lives separate from a run. Finally, restarting the level when you die. So especially when it was like very strictly a game that was supposed to be 9 levels, 9 minutes kind of thing, this made more sense, right? Because it was like a tension between either you die normally and you restart the level and your punishment is lost time, right? Getting to the end in 9 minutes was the goal. Or you can sacrifice a life for a super blast, and in that method, you don't restart the level. So you had this sort of tension where maybe you're low in health and you're like deciding whether or not I should use the super blast now or save it for that boss where it's going to be more useful. I thought that'd be really interesting. So these are all interesting little designer curiosities that I was kind of playing around with my head and I wanted to try and prototyping. But it turns out players have really strong expectations for how lives are supposed to be. So, we've been taught for, again, 35 years about what lives are in platformers and all kinds of arcade games. And even in roguelikes where lives have become more disposable, people still value a life. So just calling it a life alone makes it valuable. Lives are precious to players, and I can't outright fight that. If I'm going to try and fight that, I have to be aware of it, and I have to try to mitigate it. Some of the things I'm trying to do to deal with this is, one, I'm easing up on all those things up there, but also, first, I'm going to make the Super Blast more powerful. It already is quite powerful. Essentially, I'm balancing the Super Blast to perception. Like, it needs to be even more powerful than balanced. It needs to be overpowered to account for the fact that people overvalue their lives, right? That's the only way people are going to be incentivized to spend a life on a Super Blast. So I'm going to probably lean overpowered, probably almost up to launch, and then I might dial it back at that point if it's like, okay, now people are just exploiting it. I also want to downplay the significance of lives. I think brawlers like TMNT and they call it brawlers, fighters. I don't know. I guess they're called brawlers. TMNT, X-Men, those old arcade games that all work like this. More recently would be, well, it's still pretty old. Oh geez, I just forgot the name, the Clash one, but not Clash. Wow, Castle Crashers, that's what I was thinking of, sorry. And Simpsons is also a great example, thank you. So yeah, all these games have lives, but when you die, you respawn almost instantaneously, and you come in with invincibility frames, and you're right back in the action. You might have lost like a second or two. Maybe you're not right next to the enemy that killed you, but you're right back in the action. And I want to kind of move this sort of system into 9 to kind of make it feel like, okay, lives are just an extension of your health. You might ask, well, why have lives then? Well, because you're a cat, right? And finally, I probably want to reduce the amount of health per life. Part of the reason lives are so precious is because you have 5 hit points. Maybe it should be 3. Maybe it should be 4. I'm not sure yet, but I definitely think that by reducing the health and making each life less of a thing, they all become less precious, and therefore people are more willing to spend them, which is great. Lesson number 7. Balance to field-based parameters. So you might be familiar with Unity's kind of gravity scale in the rigid body. I set a jump speed for my player. This translates to like a jump arc. The player jumps up with the initial velocity, and then the gravity pulls them down. If you're familiar with physics or making platformers, you've seen something like this before. And this is fine, but it's problematic. What happens when a player says it feels too floaty, right? It's not great, actually, because if you change the gravity, right, if I say, okay, it's too floaty, I'm going to make it less floaty by increasing the gravity. If I do that, it's also going to reduce the size of my jump. Now I have to tweak jump speed to account for that, and I'm essentially changing 2 things to accomplish 1 experiential goal, right? I think it's better to try to design your parameters, if you can, around the experience. So for example, now I'm setting jump hang time, which is essentially your floatiness, and jump height. And then I'm using the kinematic equations to derive the physics, my initial velocity and gravity. And then I just update all these values every time I change these inspector values, right? And this works better for me because this way, if it's too floaty, I make it less floaty by just changing the hang time, right? Or vice versa, right? Same thing with the height. If the height is not right, I change the height. But it's always doing all that behind the work scenes. I'm not thinking in physics, I'm thinking in terms of experience, and that's way better. It's a way better place to be for balancing, that's for sure. Lesson number 8. Alpha is a myth. So, we have this concept of alpha being like a feature complete thing. A game in alpha is feature complete. That is, a game is playable and it contains all the major features. The alpha phase usually ends with a feature freeze, etc., etc. This is really dangerous, I think, for an indie, to think of games as alpha and beta as like these very discrete milestones, these unmalleable milestones, because you end up building a waterfall, right? If you're building to alpha, then you're not being iterative by nature, and you find yourself in a place in beta where it's really, really hard to change things, and you're polishing the game, but there's problems that you didn't solve in alpha, and it's not a good time as an indie. You want to be iterative, you want to be designing and evaluating and playtesting as you go, And you'll often find, like with the example of a platformer, that you have to end up doing some polish as you go. You can't save the polish for later. You can't build a whole game to feature complete without doing any polish. You have to do a little bit of focused polish. It's just about choosing the right things. It's about focus. It's about being smart about it. And this is important because if you don't do any polish and you're building to alpha and you're like me and you want to start selling your game, now you have a problem. If you saw my gameplay trailer, it's fine, but like it's not visually competitive because only the cat has any polish. Everything around the cat is not visually competitive. And the market doesn't care how much longer you have to work in your game. They see something that looks not polished, they're just not going to play it, right? So this is a problem that I don't have a sort of vertical slice that's polished that I could be selling right now. I have to kind of play catch up now and do lots of extra polish to make something that I could even make a trailer out of. And our last lesson, trust in a good process. We've heard this quote from Miyamoto, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. And this is a good quote. I get the point. If you delay it, you take the time to make it good. Makes sense. But you might have also heard you can't polish a turd. And I think these are both true in their own way. The idea being that like if you have a game that is really has a lot of problems, especially at the core, delaying it is not enough to fix it. And we've all seen games that have been delayed over and over again. They don't necessarily get any better. They're not better always because of a delay. You can't polish a turd, meaning like you have to actually do the right thing to fix the game in addition to delaying it, in addition to improving the production. You have to follow a good process. A game that really inspires me is Into the Breach. This is one of my favorite games of the last few years. And it's a game that I played and it just felt so perfect and complete. It felt so like it just came out perfectly formed. I couldn't imagine in my head how they stumbled upon these things. It just felt like it was so hand designed in a way. But that's not the case at all. If you listen to the podcast, if you read blog posts, etc., watch videos about their development, it was very messy. They went through 4 years of lots of different iterations, and the game looked totally different all the way up to like 3 years of the 4 years. And it's not just that they took 4 years. Great that they had the luxury to take 4 years. But that's not the only reason it turned out good. It's because at each point of those struggles, they were able to evaluate and say, okay, this is what is and is not working. Here's the core we actually care about. Here's the part that we think is interesting that'll make a good game. Let's move forward with this. Let's ditch that, right? They followed a really good process and trusted in their process. I'm sure it was probably scary in the middle of it, but they did eventually end up at a really, really awesome game because they followed the process and took the time to make a good game. So I like to think in terms of process over just delaying. Inevitably, with a good process, you will end up with a great game. So to go back to our metaphor, you take your poop and you put it in a good process machine, and out you get something like corn. I guess it's fertilizer. That's the metaphor, right? I don't know. But the point being that good process is what can turn poop into corn. So let's review all our lessons. Know your personal goals to guide your development. Pick the right prototype for your goals. Make it personal to bring out the you, to bring out what's special. Lean into what resonates, even if that wasn't your vision. Just lean into it. Avoid unnecessary risks, because why make it harder than it has to be? Don't fight player expectations, unless that's like the specific point of what you're doing. Balance to feel-based parameters, because experience is what matters. No one cares about what the gravity is set to. They care about what they experience. Alpha is a myth. You want to be iterative. You want to polish early. If you can, do a vertical slice. And finally, trust in a good process. It is the best way to get good outcomes. And that's it. I do want to invite you all to join our Discord to follow our development. You can help us make all these goals and lessons a reality. Here's a QR code, but I'll also post a link in the Discord. Again, we have a cat channel. Please share your cats, and we have a lot of fun. I also share builds pretty regularly, and you could share feedback, bugs, and suggestions and whatnot. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rohit.
People are all clapping right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely awesome presentation.
Yeah, really good.
I've got a question myself. So
Yeah, please.
I'm especially interested in what you mentioned about field-based parameters, because that's not something I see talked about a lot. And I'm curious, how did you decide in 9, like specifically which parameters were going to be field-based parameters?
Yeah, it's definitely not a science. It definitely came down to what I kept hearing and like the frustration of tweaking to try and get the thing to be less floaty or more floaty. I mean, the game is still actually too floaty, which is kind of funny. But people keep saying it's too floaty. They don't say your gravity. I mean, they might say if they're trying to solve a problem in their head, but generally people give feedback in the form of their experience. So taking that, trying to adjust and iterate in the game, and having trouble like tweaking 2 things to get 1 thing, that's how I decided, I know the math here. I took physics. I know that I could change this equation to be based on, I could derive these things from these other things, right? I could know how to solve for X. So why don't I try it that way? And that just became so much more fun once I tried it. But I don't have a list. I hope you weren't expecting that.
I had a question.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the points you were talking about was when you were mentioning unnecessary risks. I think it was that section. When you were talking sort of about prototyping, and you mentioned like if you have a lot of systems, like if you're making a strategy game or something, where you have to make a lot of systems in order to know if it all works,
Right.
and how that's sort of a bad risk, or it's risky because it's going to take you a long time to make all those processes.
Right.
Do you have direct experience with that? Like, can you speak to that? Like, has that happened to you where you sort of early in your career did that, or
Not at a large scale. I'm not the only.
or have you seen that? I guess it like have you seen it where people will make bad risk? I never really looked at it in that way, as I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah, I'll have to think of some like examples that are kind of well known. I'm sure someone else probably has one on their mind. For me, the only one that I could think of in my personal experience, I don't make a lot of highly systemic, like big system kind of games. If anyone here makes RTSs or those kinds of things, or that would be really interesting to hear from you. But yeah, for me, I remember doing one for a game jam, which was the worst idea because game jams, you have almost no time. And it was this idea of like balancing multiple different gods. The gods were giving you powers. It was a global game jam. And I was trying to make this like really delicate balance where you're like pleasing one god, but also making another god angry. And you have to try and navigate that balance to like, they give you gifts or they give you curses, and then you have to use those curses against the final boss. And like, it was a fun concept, but it required the balance to be fun. And it wasn't. As a result, we got to the end of the game jam, and luckily we made the bosses, and the bosses were fun, but it was totally arbitrary how you got to the boss. The whole concept was supposed to be, I influence this fun system with my actions, with my agency, and then I, curry the favor of these gods and disappoint these ones, and the one I disappoint becomes my final boss. Cool in concept, but it only works if the balance is there. So that's an example on a tiny scale. I'm sure people who have worked on RTSs, like I said, might have examples at a larger scale. Luckily for me, being in the casual mobile space, I haven't had as many problems, but I have seen, just from pure balancing, like balancing lots of levels, getting the retention to be good, getting those numbers to go up. I have seen, kind of people try a mechanic that's not great, or try to get all the systems to interlock, and like it's just not quite clicking, and they don't give enough time to do it. You need the kind of AAA resources to really spend that time doing that, I think. Or you need to be lucky and or super smart and get it right early in a prototype.
Cool. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Ro, I've got a question. So having also come from a more larger studio background for a lot of my game dev, how do you, especially when this is a passion project of your own, how do you constrain yourself? How do you make sure that, like, normally you would have producers, you would have product owners, you would have other people on your team that can kind of check you on your unbridled creativity. How do you check yourself? How do you prevent yourself from going down the obsessive route rather than the polish route?
For sure. I think the biggest thing, first of all, I'm not good at it. I'm not going to pretend like I'm good at it. I have a lot of trouble with this, but I would say the biggest thing for me is just like a sense of responsibility. And I have to create those things for myself. If I were working by myself and it was a passion project and there was no stakes, I think it'd be 100 times harder because like I mentioned, I'm trying to make Magic, who invested in me, proud. That gives me a sense of I need to get this game out ASAP because I have teammates who are relying on me and who I'm paying and who, we're trying to work together to build something and we all are invested in this product. That sense of responsibility is really the only thing for me that helps me check myself. If it weren't for that, I think I would go crazy and just make a game forever. And so if you can build those things into your project somehow, a way to feel responsible, a way to have stakes, I think that's going to really help you as an indie.
Are you looking to release 9 on Steam or?
Yeah, the initial goal is Steam. We'll look at Epic and stuff too, and just PC in general. But it'd be nice to release it on consoles down the road. Definitely focus first on PC though.
But it's a game controller recommended sort of game?
Yeah, I'm probably going to do the whole Guacamelee thing and like put up front gamepad recommended.
Right.
Because it definitely is better. Cool. Any other questions?
How big is the total team that's currently working on the project?
We're, I think, 4 people right now. So it's me, it's Brian, who I think is here, and then I have 2 other teammates, Lester and Denny. Lester is a programmer and Denny is an artist. So 4 of us in the team. We just started talking to a videographer to do a trailer for us. So he'd be number 5.
And last thing, why don't you plug yourself? Plug things that you've worked on. Do you have a certain website? Is there, you have the game itself, and you mentioned a Discord. You want to post the Discord link? What's what's other personal plugging thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of personal plugging things to do. I would say for like myself outside of my work and stuff. I think this is the big thing for me. This is my first passion indie project in a very, very long time. I feel like I'm a different kind of developer now, and I want this to be really representative of that. So I would say just please go check out our Discord. Please play, test, or build. Tell us what's not working for you, and we can make the game a lot better. That's the main thing for me. My work is in casinos right now, so there's not like a ton to plug there in terms of things you can actually go play right now, or things that necessarily will resonate. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of what else. That's really it. I mean, if I go back to this first slide. Yeah, no, I think that's it. I write a design blog and stuff. I'm pretty frequent on Twitter. I tweet frequently on Twitter. Definitely come say hi. By the way, if you have any questions about working remotely, I think I mentioned earlier, I've been working remotely for like 6 years and I've gotten very used to it. I know that it could still be an adjustment for a lot of people. So if you have any kind of questions for how to manage your time or how to stay motivated and that kind of stuff, feel free to hit me up and just chat. I'm pretty regular here and in the Boston Slack and on Twitter and stuff. You can always reach out to me.
Ro, I was wondering, your company, did you have to negotiate with your company to be able to make the game? Obviously, this game doesn't compete with anything your company makes, but the company you work for. But
I did not
to negotiate or anything like that. Like they're always cool with it, or do they even have a policy about that?
They do not, as far as I know. I actually started 9 in March, and then I got laid off from my company at the time in June with the whole pandemic and stuff, and business slowing down. And I got a new job in July, mid-July or so. So I was already working on the project. They didn't seem to really care much. It wasn't a direct competitor. I don't know if that's the case for future things I take on, especially like you mentioned, if it was a direct competitor, that would definitely be a problem, right?
Right, yeah.
To the business I'm in. But this is so different and so small, they don't care. So
yeah, that's okay. Yeah, because some companies at least want something like some documents signed or things like that. Some companies are really cool with it. Others aren't. But that's
Yeah, I've had mixed experiences myself. I've had companies who said you just shouldn't have told me. Like I've been told that. Like it's fine, but don't tell me because once you tell me, I have to go to HR. I've been told that. I've had people who said, anything you make, we own. Who've been that extreme. So I've had a mix of things. I don't know. I'm hoping that these days it's becoming more lenient, but I can't say that confidently because it's been all over the place for me.
Yeah, because in some companies, like if you come up with it while you work for them, they do own it. So.
Yeah, and that's true for any kind of gambling design thing I come up with now. GameCo does own, so it's something I'm mindful of.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Well, does anyone have any final questions they want to ask? Feel free to just speak out if you have any right now.
I had a quick question, although I'd let anyone else go first, just because I already asked. All right. Speaking of the casino stuff, and sort of how like loot boxes and game loops, bringing people back to your game since it's a roguelike, like FTL and Into the Breach, how they have those unlocks and stuff. Do you find yourself using those sort of techniques, like not Skinner box, but sort of like reward systems to get people to keep, like, are you planning on doing that with 9? Making sort of a reward system, or
I am, yeah. It's pretty light compared to what's done in free to play and stuff. That's for sure. It's very light, but yes, just because it's very easy. If you think about it, just from a roguelike standpoint, it's very easy to be to lose motivation, to be discouraged, right? Because it's just like a pattern that's very naturally about loss. And if you don't already have kind of like a built-up resistance to that, it's easy to just throw it away. And I'm a massive Spelunky fan. For me, that's like the roguelike in terms of just how it really throws itself into systemic learning and how it encourages you to. I think for me, there's almost a mental shift where you have to learn as a player, and it's not easy for everybody, that every life is like a resource. It's something that you can use to learn something. And if you sacrifice a life to learn something, if I run headfirst into a beehive and get killed by bees, I've now learned something more about the bees. And like that's going to help me long-term. That long-term systemic learning is how you kind of stay motivated and into it. On top of course, all the fun surprises that happen. But that only starts working after you spend a lot of time with the system. No one's going to get that after just a few runs, even of the best roguelike, I think. You need to have kind of little carrots just to kind of help people move through the initial beats, and give them something to work for, and then hopefully that extrinsic stuff kind of fades away, and then the intrinsic stuff is what takes over. That's the goal, right? In Spelunky, for example, they have all those good things working once you're far enough, but they have only a few carrots. Things like you can build shortcuts in Spelunky, and you might be working on a shortcut to level 4, right? And that's like your short-term goal is working on that shortcut, and that's something you could do, and once you unlock it, it's permanent, so that's like a nice little carrot. But then once you get it, there's kind of the bigger systemic learnings of the game that you're working on long-term. We have a badge system. It's really, I actually ripped it from Into the Breach, pretty much. Into the Breach, amazing system where you unlock achievements, they give you medals, and then you spend those medals on squads. The squads each have different kinds of gameplay, so you have this beautiful loop of like, and then now on top of the different gameplay, the squads also have squad-specific achievements. So it completes the loop, right? You do some achievements, you get some medals, you buy some squads, they give you more ways to play and more achievements. So it's like it's a wonderful way to just like keep the game fresh too, right? Because you're slowly unlocking new squads and slowly finding new ways to play, and you only do it by winning and getting achievements in the first place. So you're not going to end up with a complicated squad up front. You have to actually work really hard to get there. But I thought that was a really great way to do it. We have a similar thing. We have achievements. I'm actually not struggling a bit with the theming right now. We don't know how to theme the achievements yet. I don't want it to be mouse or cheese based because that's all in the game. That's all the enemies. But right now it's very generically like achievements, and then you use the achievements to buy badges, and then you wear one badge when you go into the game. So it's not a power creep thing. It's just like a select your flavor, right? In a perfect world, we do like cat breeds or something, but that's a lot more skinning work. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yes, we are the short answer is yes, we are playing with those kinds of reward systems. It's a great way to gel, to kind of smooth things over between the points that you're not intrinsically motivated, right? Gives you something to work for.
Right.
I do hope that that fades away. That's the goal. If someone is just telling me that they're trying to beat their best time, that they're trying to find something or do a certain move because they want to, that's like the dream, right?
Right.
That's a good question, though. Cool. Anything else? Oh, I thanks for the meme. Jeez.
Yeah, that was quick. That was quick, Alex.
Fastest Photoshop in the West.
Oh, geez. I feel like the face makes it worse.
Oh my gosh. We'll make sure it doesn't We'll make sure it doesn't circulate too far on the internet.
No, I kind of love it, actually. It's fine.
Ro, I actually thought that was a great quote because the best thing about it is that you're totally right. Like I'm sure all of us have been through terrible situations or features or games even that we're not super excited to work on. But when you have a great process, that great process can save the product from anything, from despair, from complacency, from getting into a rut. I think that's part of the reason why I think project managers and producers are so important in many ways, because they're that guardian of good process, saying, I know we should skip these things, but when we've skipped it in the past, things have gone poorly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the project managers and producers make that stuff run, that's for sure. But I've also seen it for designers too. I mean, the best designers I've worked with or worked under have been like designers who understand that the process is actually more important than the theory, right? You can have great theories about game design, but if you have a really good process, you can make any good game theoretically, or any game into a good game, which is awesome.